We are commencing legal action against Mrs. Meghan Markle. Her televised allegations, particularly the Oprah interview, have inflicted undue harm upon the royal family. An apology no longer suffices. The matter will now proceed through the...
The room fell silent before King Charles had even finished speaking. Around the polished palace table, senior courtiers stared at the document carrying the monarch's final instruction. Meghan's HRH status was not merely being restricted, suspended, or placed aside. It was being permanently erased from official royal use. With one deliberate order, the king had drawn a line that no apology, negotiation, or family intervention could easily reverse. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles lowered his eyes to the final paragraph and read every word himself. The official palace meeting had brought together William, Camilla, Princess Anne, and constitutional advisors, because this was no ordinary family dispute. HRH, meaning Her Royal Highness, was a formal royal style showing direct standing within the monarchy. Meghan had kept that connection in principle after leaving public duties, though she had agreed not to use it publicly. Now the king was ordering it removed from palace records, ceremonial documents, internal correspondence, and future royal announcements. The monarch finished reading, placed the paper flat on the table, and did not look toward his eldest son. That refusal carried more pain than any speech. William sat rigidly beside him, relieved that the institution would finally have a clear rule, yet shaken by its meaning. The future king understood that this decision did more than change wording. It confirmed that reconciliation with Harry and Meghan had fallen to its lowest point. A senior courtier leaned closer and noticed language no one had expected: permanent and without future restoration. He read it twice and set down his pen. The phrase meant the status was not being paused for negotiation. It was being erased, in a way designed to survive apology, pressure, or family repair. Princess Anne broke the silence with one quiet question. Had Harry already been informed? Charles did not answer at once. His pause revealed the truth before his words did. The Duke would learn only after the order had been formally sealed, meaning approved through palace procedure. Anne watched her brother carefully, and he finally said the crown could no longer delay because the family feared its emotional cost. Camilla remained still, as the royal secretary lifted the document. Then she noticed a confidential folder beneath it. The queen consort glanced toward Charles, but he gave no explanation. Inside rested private conversations, warnings, and confrontations that had pushed him toward this irreversible line. The order had been spoken, but its true emotional force could only be understood by looking at the four people whose lives, loyalties, and family wounds were now trapped inside it. To the palace, HRH was a formal style governed by royal authority. To Meghan, it represented the final thread connecting her to the institution she had entered with hope and left in anger. To Harry, it was inseparable from his identity as the king's son. And to Charles and William, it had become a painful symbol of unfinished conflict, one capable of reopening every private wound the family had failed to heal. Meghan had built a new life, far from royal corridors. Yet the monarchy still carried emotional power over her. She had once served as a working royal, meaning she performed official duties on behalf of the crown. And the HRH styling remained a symbolic link to that former role. Even without using it publicly, those three letters proved that the palace could not completely erase the chapter she had lived through. A sharp vibration broke the silence in California. Meghan opened an encrypted message from her legal advisor, a protected communication designed to keep sensitive information private, and read the same phrase twice: permanent removal. Her expression tightened. She locked the phone, stepped away, and gave no answer. The silence told Harry something serious had happened before she spoke a single word. Harry watched her closely and asked what the message said. She returned, placed the phone in his hand, and remained standing while he read it. Anger rose across his face, but beneath it was something deeper. He was not only a husband defending his wife. He was a prince, watching another piece of his royal identity disappear through a decision made in a room he was no longer allowed to enter. Back at the palace, William carried the same weight into a private conversation with Catherine. The prince admitted that the order might protect the institution by ending years of uncertainty, but it could also destroy whatever remained between him and his brother. He had wanted clarity. He had not expected clarity to feel so much like loss. Catherine listened without interrupting, then asked the question he had been avoiding. Had Charles acted as king, or as a wounded father who had finally reached his limit? William looked away. He could not separate the two. The monarch had defended royal authority, yet the father inside him had also responded to years of anger, distance, and public pain. The decision now touched every side of the family. Meghan felt rejected, Harry felt cut off, William felt responsible, and Charles carried the burden of making the order final. But beneath all of their reactions remained one dangerous question. What exact moment had turned years of tension into a command that erased the title forever? That answer lay inside a private royal ceremony, months earlier, when one unexpected confrontation pushed the king beyond the point of patience. The final order did not begin with a lawyer's recommendation or a courtier's memorandum. It began during a private anniversary ceremony at Windsor, where a seating card, a royal program, and one sharply worded telephone exchange exposed how fragile the family's remaining arrangement had become. Those present would later remember the moment not as another disagreement, but as the instant Charles decided symbolic compromise was no longer possible. Charles had spent years protecting a narrow agreement that satisfied no one completely. Meghan could retain the HRH styling as part of her royal history, but she could not use it publicly or commercially. The distinction mattered because HRH, meaning Her Royal Highness, signaled an active and recognized place close to the crown. Senior aides had warned the king that the arrangement was becoming impossible to defend whenever invitations, biographies, and outside projects referred to her royal position in different ways. The tension finally broke before the Windsor anniversary ceremony. Meghan's representatives contacted the palace and demanded that her seating card and the official program identify her as Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. The ceremony was a private royal gathering, marking an important family anniversary, but its printed program still carried institutional weight because every name and title reflected the working order of the monarchy. Charles took the call personally. He listened without interrupting as the request was repeated with growing firmness, then answered that the styling could not appear at an event representing the working crown. His voice remained controlled, but the monarch understood why the moment mattered. Allowing the title would weaken the boundary he had defended for years. Refusing it would turn a fragile compromise into an open family wound. Meghan did not retreat. Through the recorded palace call, she argued that removing the styling from the program would amount to rewriting her place in royal history. The words struck deeper than anyone expected. Charles gripped the edge of his desk and stared at the marked seating plan before him. Then he ended the exchange with a sentence his private secretary would later record in a confidential account. "Then we must decide what history will record." The silence after the call changed everything. The king summoned his private secretary and ordered a complete review of every constitutional and ceremonial reference to Meghan's HRH status. A constitutional reference meant any official rule, record, or royal document defining her formal place within the monarchy. He wanted every invitation, archive entry, internal guideline, and public description examined without exception. The review remained hidden for weeks. Harry knew nothing of the folder growing inside the palace. and Meghan believed the dispute had ended with the ceremony. But when the Duke finally requested a direct meeting with his father, Charles had already placed the permanent removal order beside his chair. When father and son finally entered the same room, the argument was no longer about protocol. It was about whether anything remained of the family they had once been. No aides stood between them. No advisors softened their words. When Harry entered the king's private sitting room, Charles remained beside the window, with the unsigned order resting on a nearby table. The Duke had come expecting negotiation. Instead, he found a father who believed every compromise had been exhausted, and a monarch prepared to make the most personal decision of his reign without asking his son's permission. Harry had requested the meeting as soon as he learned that palace officials were reviewing Meghan's status. He believed the existing arrangement could still be preserved if father and son spoke without courtiers shaping every sentence. Charles agreed for the same reason. A private sitting room meant no minutes, no formal advisors, and no institutional buffer. It was supposed to prevent another family dispute from becoming a public crisis. Instead, the closed door made every word more dangerous. The Duke pointed toward the document and accused the king of punishing his wife because she had refused to remain silent about her experience inside the monarchy. His voice rose as he argued that Meghan's title was being used as a weapon against her. Charles did not interrupt. He waited until the anger had emptied itself into the room, then answered with painful control. The monarch said the issue was not silence, it was authority. Royal status, he explained, could not be separated from royal responsibility whenever it became useful. The phrase, royal responsibility, meant the official duties, limits, and public accountability expected from someone carrying the crown's recognition. Meghan had stepped away from those duties, yet her position was still being invoked in arrangements where the palace had no control. To him, that contradiction threatened more than family pride. It weakened the meaning of service itself. Harry's expression hardened. He asked whether William had demanded the change and whether his brother had once again placed the institution above blood. Charles answered immediately. The decision was his alone. He refused to let the brothers' feud become a shield behind which the real issue could hide. The future king had given advice, but he had not issued the order. The king then revealed what the Duke had not known. The Windsor ceremony dispute was only the final trigger. A documented palace review had recorded repeated attempts to invoke Meghan's royal position in private negotiations, event arrangements, biographies, and public-facing projects. Each incident had reopened the same question. Could the title remain when the duties behind it had ended? Harry rose sharply and pushed his chair back. Charles did not stop him. He only warned that the order would proceed unless one final constitutional review found a clear reason to halt it. A constitutional review was a formal examination of whether the decision followed royal authority and established rules. The confrontation ended without reconciliation, leaving the fate of Meghan's status in the hands of the people who understood how royal power truly moved behind palace walls. The monarchy rarely survives through emotion alone. Behind the king's final order stood a disciplined network of advisors, senior royals, and constitutional guardians, who understood that a title could become more dangerous in ambiguity than in removal. Yet the strongest influence did not come from a lawyer or private secretary. It came from Princess Anne, who believed the crown could not demand sacrifice from working royals while preserving privileges for those outside its duties. Charles held the final authority over royal styles, but he could not ignore what came after the signature. Private secretaries managed palace decisions. Constitutional experts tested whether those decisions followed established authority, and senior royals judged how they would affect the family's future. A royal style was more than ceremonial wording. It signaled who could appear to speak with the crown's recognition, which meant uncertainty around Meghan's position could weaken the boundaries of royal service. Anne entered the private meeting, carrying a marked copy of the Palace Review. She placed it before her brother and told him that half-decisions had allowed resentment to grow on every side. Meghan remained tied to a title she could not freely use, while the monarchy remained responsible for a connection it could not control. The princess believed the arrangement had trapped both sides inside the same unfinished conflict. The king admitted what he had refused to say aloud. Permanently removing the styling felt like closing the door on Harry's return. He feared that the order would not be read as a rule, but as a father rejecting his younger son. Anne listened without softening her response. Refusing to decide, she said, had already caused greater harm by allowing every invitation, project, and private demand to become another battlefield. A single page shifted the discussion. Anne opened the documented review and pointed to repeated confusion among foreign hosts, charities, and commercial partners. Some had asked whether Meghan represented the crown. Others had assumed her royal connection carried official approval. The record showed that ambiguity was no longer symbolic. It had become a practical risk to the monarchy's authority. William entered near the end and read the marked passages in silence. The prince refused to recommend punishment because he knew any personal demand could deepen Harry's belief that his brother had driven the decision. Instead, he asked for one clear rule that would apply consistently to every non-working royal. The future king understood why this mattered. Any exception left unresolved today could become a larger constitutional problem when the crown eventually passed to him. Charles looked from his sister to his son, then lowered his pen. They were aligned on clarity, but none of them felt victorious. The monarch signed the order because duty demanded certainty, even as the father inside him understood the personal cost. The pen left the paper, the seal was applied, and within minutes, the decision began moving beyond the room where the king had tried to contain it. The decision traveled faster than the family could emotionally absorb it. Palace databases changed. Draft biographies were corrected. Ceremonial lists were recalled before publication. Then the formal notice reached California, carrying language so precise that no private appeal could disguise its meaning. Meghan's royal styling had not been paused. It had been removed permanently, and every future reference would now reflect a life outside the official structure of the crown. Palace staff moved immediately. They updated official records, archived templates, invitation rules, and internal guidance so the HRH styling could never appear beside Meghan's name again. An invitation protocol was the palace system deciding how titles and ranks must be written for formal events. The change mattered, because one old template or careless reference could suggest that she still acted with royal authority, reopening the confusion Charles had just ended. The formal communication drew one sharp distinction. Meghan would remain Duchess of Sussex, a title tied to her marriage, but she would no longer possess or be described by the royal style under any palace circumstance. Those three removed letters changed nothing about her legal name, yet they erased the symbolic recognition that had once connected her directly to the working crown. Meghan stood alone at the kitchen counter with the printed notice in her hands. She read the final sentence, folded the page once with deliberate care, and waited until Harry entered. Then she looked at him and said, "They have made their choice." Her voice remained steady, but the stillness around those words carried anger, humiliation, and a pain she refused to display openly. Harry took the notice and reacted at once. He called the decision cruel, calculated, and designed to embarrass his wife before the world. The Duke reached for his phone, ready to contact Charles, but she stopped him. Meghan told him that calling in anger would give the palace exactly what it expected: another emotional confrontation that could be used to justify the order. A new discovery deepened the wound. Their advisor reviewed the document and explained that informal family reconciliation could not restore the styling. Only a new sovereign decision, an official command issued by the reigning monarch, could reverse it. Even a private reunion with Charles would not be enough. The removal had been built to survive sentiment. At Windsor, the king received confirmation that the notice had been delivered. Charles closed his eyes for a moment, then asked whether any response had come back. None had. The monarch had gained the certainty he believed the crown needed, yet the silence from his son brought no relief. That evening, Meghan asked Harry to speak with her alone. No lawyers, no staff, no prepared statement. She wanted them to decide whether they would answer with fury or refuse to give the palace the battle it expected. With the palace waiting for retaliation, Harry entered the room expecting anger, only to find Meghan considering a response that could completely alter the meaning of the king's victory. For the first time since the order arrived, there were no advisors speaking, no phones vibrating, and no prepared statement waiting for approval. Meghan and Harry sat across from one another as husband and wife, rather than royal figures, locked in a constitutional battle. What she said next surprised him. She would not plead for the styling, challenge the order, or allow the palace to define her future through one removed title. Harry entered the conversation ready for war. He wanted an immediate reversal, a direct call to Charles, and a public statement accusing the palace of targeting Meghan. The Duke believed silence would look like surrender. She saw something else. Fighting for HRH, a royal style meaning Her Royal Highness, would keep them emotionally tied to the institution they had already chosen to leave. Meghan asked him one simple question. If they demanded the letters back, would they be defending dignity or asking the crown to decide their worth again? Harry did not answer at once. The anger in him began to crack, exposing the pain beneath it. He admitted that the order felt less like a title being removed and more like another rejection from his father. The confession changed the room. Harry said he had spent years pretending the conflict was about security, status, duty, and public treatment. But the deepest wound remained personal. Charles had once represented home, protection, and belonging. Now every palace decision seemed to confirm that his sonhood carried less weight than the institution standing between them. Meghan listened, then told him she would not measure her value through letters granted or withdrawn by the crown. She had built a life beyond royal approval, and no palace document could erase that. Yet she refused to pretend the decision did not hurt. The order had taken a part of her history and rewritten it without her consent. A quiet decision followed. Their official response would acknowledge the palace order without challenging it. An official response was the short public statement issued on their behalf to define their position. There would be no demand for restoration, no legal threat, and no attack on the king. By refusing confrontation, they would deny the monarchy the battle many expected. Harry resisted until Meghan placed the folded notice between them. She told him that carrying the grievance forever would allow the palace to remain present in every choice they made. He looked at the paper, then agreed, not because the pain had disappeared, but because he finally understood that anger could become another form of obedience. Their restrained statement reached London within hours. Palace officials had prepared for fury and received silence instead. But outside those walls, the story was already exploding across front pages, turning a private royal rupture into a global judgment on power, family, and identity. By dawn, the palace order was no longer confined to royal files. It had become the image, headline, and argument dominating the world outside the gates. The next morning, Britain awoke to a royal separation expressed in 4 stark words. Not HEHE status, erased forever. The headline stretched across the front page of the London Chronicle, beneath a split image of Charles leaving Windsor and Meghan standing beside Harry in California. Outside Buckingham Palace, Tourists stopped beneath the railings to read breaking alerts, while broadcasters described the order as the monarchy's clearest boundary since the Sussex departure. Newspapers treated the decision as both a constitutional clarification and a family collapse. A constitutional clarification meant the Crown had formally removed confusion over who could appear connected to official royal authority. That mattered, because the dispute was no longer about private feelings alone. It now shaped how governments, charities, event organizers, and the public understood Meghan's place outside royal service. Palace communications staff issued a brief confirmation before speculation could overtake the wording. The statement said the change reflected her permanent position beyond official duties and would apply across all future records. It offered no personal explanation, no mention of Harry, and no sign that Charles wished to defend himself as a father. The silence around the family wound made the institutional message feel even colder. A broadcaster standing outside Buckingham Palace read the exact order live. He reached the final phrase, paused, and then called it a family fracture translated into royal law. The words traveled quickly, because they captured what official language could not hide. A title had been erased, but the deeper story was a father and son, divided by a decision neither could emotionally escape. Harry watched the coverage with growing frustration. Each commentator turned Meghan's pain into a contest over winners and losers, while every headline treated his relationship with Charles as public property. Before another panel could begin, she switched off the television. Meghan refused to let strangers reduce their private loss to entertainment, and he did not turn it back on. The restrained Sussex response changed the debate. It contained no attack on the king, no demand for restoration, and no threat of legal action. Commentators who had prepared for retaliation were forced to confront the absence of it. Their silence made the palace order appear heavier, not lighter, because it left Charles alone with the meaning of what he had done. Inside the palace, William spoke quietly to his father. The prince warned that silence from California might carry more emotional weight than confrontation. Charles understood. Anger could have been answered. Accusations could have been denied. But restraint offered him nothing to fight against, and no distraction from the cost. When the headlines faded, and the palace gates grew quiet again, 4 people were left with a verdict no newspaper could deliver for them. In the end, the order achieved exactly what Charles intended. Meghan's HRH status disappeared from royal records, palace correspondence, ceremonial language, and every future official reference. The monarchy regained the clarity it believed had been missing for years. Yet the decision also destroyed the final illusion that the Sussex separation remained temporary. The door was no longer half open. The family had formally acknowledged that 2 different futures now existed. The change was complete. Meghan remained Duchess of Sussex, a title connected to her marriage, but the HRH styling no longer existed in palace practice or recognition. That distinction mattered, because a royal style showed formal closeness to the working crown. Charles had now established a lasting principle. Royal status would remain tied to active duty, public accountability, and service to the monarchy. Alone after the final briefing, the king placed the signed copy inside a red dispatch box. The container was used to carry official papers requiring the monarch's attention, but this document carried a burden no formal process could remove. Charles kept his hand on the lid for one silent moment. As sovereign, he had protected the structure of the crown. As a father, he understood that the same act had pushed Harry farther away. Across the ocean, Meghan read the notice one final time. She did not tear it apart or throw it away. Instead, she placed it inside a private file and closed the drawer. The removed status remained part of her history, but she refused to let it control her future. Her pain had not vanished. It had simply changed into a quieter form of acceptance. Harry chose not to make another appeal. The Duke finally recognized that defending his marriage did not require an endless battle for palace approval. Another demand would keep their lives tied to the institution they had already left. By remaining silent, he accepted a difficult truth. Belonging could not be forced through a title, and family affection could not be restored through official wording. William faced his own loss. The prince knew the monarchy had gained certainty, but that certainty had widened the distance between the brothers. He had helped protect the rules he might one day inherit, yet the future king could not ignore what the family had surrendered in return. Charles understood the final verdict more clearly than anyone. Authority could settle protocol, remove confusion, and define royal duty. It could not repair affection. Meghan reclaimed her independence. Harry stopped asking the palace to confirm his worth. The crown survived, stronger in structure, but smaller in spirit. The palace meeting ended with a signature, but history would remember it as the moment the crown chose certainty over reconciliation, and every person involved finally accepted the price. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.